Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from today. I appreciate you taking the time to share your ideas and help us celebrate a big milestone here at the Confluential. So, as always, I'm Kyler Cheatham. I'll be guiding the conversation today. I'm joined by Adam Cheatham, CEO of the Confluential, and Dan Krug, who is joined us as a partner, which we're very, very excited to kind of bring him into the fold. And I'll let him introduce himself here in just a second before I go through our logistics. If this is your first time here, welcome. We're so excited to have you. The mission of this conversation is not so much about what we say, right? It's about selecting the strategy that's best for your business. So a lot of that comes from the comments and the questions that you drop wherever you're joining us from today. So we are live on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and then we have a TikTok live later today, which you're welcome to join our business therapy session as well, which is always a fun Friday afternoon session. So with that, if you don't mind helping me test out the comments and just dropping in where you're joining us from, that would be excellent. And we will kind of go from there. But I will let Adam kind of take over and welcome Dan. And then we'll kind of get into our change intelligence versus change management conversation. So with that, good morning, Adam.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thanks for joining us today. My name's Adam Cheatham. I'm the CEO of the Confluential. And as Kyler mentioned, we're really excited today to introduce Dan Krug. He's our new partner here at the Confluential. He's been a long-time colleague. We've worked together for quite some time. Great family friend, and we're super excited to have him as a part of the business. So his skill set, his expertise speak for themselves, and I think you guys are going to learn a lot from this conversation, this introduction. So Dan, I'll let you introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about you and what it is you've decided to do with yourself.
That could take a while. Hey, folks. Dan Krug, I'm thrilled to be a partner at the Confluential. And the reason why I'm thrilled is I've worked with the leaders of the Confluential for many years. And it's fun to work with people who are able to solve complex problems, get things done in a variety of settings. And sometimes you think people can do that and you get into it with them and they really can't. These are people that I've done that with in the past. So we have a track record of working successfully together. And as we looked at our businesses, it just made sense that the capabilities in those businesses come together to do something bigger than what each of them can do by themselves. So very excited about the journey that we're on and the team that's being built, the clients that we currently have, and the things that we're doing. I've got 30 years in industry, which is a little hard for me to say because it makes me feel old. Spent time in automotive, textiles, building materials, but the bulk of that over 20 years in steel. Worked for the largest steel producer in North America, Nucor, for 20 years. During that time, the company went from about $4 billion in revenue to $35 billion in revenue. And it was a pleasure and a blessing to be involved with an organization growing at that pace because of the number of learning opportunities that I had as the company grew. Organic growth, acquisitions, brownfields, greenfields, bolt-ons, huge capital projects, and a whole variety of challenges from vertical integration, new markets, new geographies, never-ending stream of things to learn from. And I'm very appreciative of that. So after 20 years of doing that, I wanted to apply some of those things I learned to my own business and have been doing that the last few years. And now I'm joining forces with people who can help me bring greater value to clients, and I'm absolutely thrilled to do that. My last roles with Nucor are a little bit unusual. I led both IT in the digital transformation efforts and the human capital function, which is an unusual combination. But for anybody who has been deeply involved in technology, the technology doesn't work if the people, systems, and the business processes aren't in alignment with it. So it gave me kind of an interesting look into a Fortune 100 company and what's required to bring technology to bear that actually brings results in the business. And I think that's what we're going to talk about today.
Absolutely. Definitely running on business results. Well, a big welcome, Dan, from us and our team. We're very excited and grateful for you to bring that experience to not only us internally, but also our client community. So as always, when we have these conversations, we're going to kind of go into Dan's approach around change intelligence versus the traditional change management. What does the modern change management strategy need to look like to be successful when we see the backbone of a modern technology be, or a modern business be technology, right? It touches every single different stakeholder in the organization. So I'd love to kind of start with where we're at, which I think is always helpful. Like, what are the gaps that you guys are seeing in the marketplace around specifically change management? I think something we see a lot is that AI adoption challenge as well, in just making sure that when we spend a bunch of money on our business systems, that we're seeing some sort of return, whatever that means. So I will pull up some of these questions as we go through that. Thank you for all of the dialogue in the chat. We always appreciate you sharing your insight. Especially, it looks like we have someone developing a new MES system. You're talking to the right people in this conversation. So, and that's manufacturing execution. It brought to my attention as I was speaking yesterday that we use too many acronyms. So I'm being more intentional about explaining what that means. So if you were to say, just from a blanket statement, Dan, in the marketplace, what is lacking about the quote unquote traditional change management strategies?
Right. I would probably point towards three things. And before I get into those three things, I think traditional strategies typically emphasize casting a vision, the why, pulling people into the direction of the change, communications plans, training, this idea that if people have awareness and there's good communication and training, things are going to go well. I don't disagree with any of that, but I think those are foundational things that just have to be there. The things that are missing, I would say, starting off with, number one, are identifying the right business targets that get people focused on the right things. And I can talk a lot more about that. It's something that happens in most change initiatives. It doesn't happen well. And if that step is not in place and solid framework there, you're going to spend a lot of time corralling people on the wrong things. The second thing I would say is the methodology of building the actual execution plan. I frequently see change management separated and distant from project management, and project management ends up building execution plans, typically in a hub and spoke system, separated from the change leader or the change team, typically a team that is not deeply involved in operations or execution. And when that happens, you're setting a groundwork to build an initial plan that has no chance of withstanding the demands of the real world. Mm-hmm. It will work really well until the first thing goes wrong, and then it'll begin to crack. The third thing is what happens when things do begin to crack. The idea of outcome adapted execution, having an execution framework that allows for flexibility and nimbleness to respond to the changes. I think the vast majority of change management programs are not built to deal with the complexity of adaptive change required in the types of change that they're being applied to. A lot of the change processes, change management systems will do fine with incremental change. As soon as you get into complex adaptive change, they're going to struggle as soon as the first few things begin to deviate from the original plan.
Do you think you could give us just a quick example of how that adaptability can be more complex?
Yeah, well, I guess let me start first of all by making sure that we can differentiate between complicated and complex.
Okay.
because I think frequently in business we miss the difference. You know, an engine in a car, a combustion engine, is complicated. It has a whole bunch of parts, but they all come with diagrams. They all come with diagnostics. If something goes wrong, you can plug in the diagnostics. A trained technician can identify what went wrong, and then the fix is typically very definable. There's a lot of pieces and parts, but you can diagnose it the same way basically every time. Find the fix it. Weather systems are complex. One little thing can happen over North Dakota that trickles down and changes the weather in North Carolina. Very hard to predict. That's why weather forecasts are frequently wrong. Economics, wildly complex. People go to school for 7 to 10 years only to predict the wrong things, because you can't tell when an oil crisis in the Middle East trickles down into different economies across the globe. So when we talk about outcome adapted execution, we're talking about planning for that. I don't know about you guys, but I've never been involved in like a big systems integration or workflow changes where you're integrating technology where it goes exactly as you thought it would. So it starts with creating
a train wreck. We've seen some of those.
Yeah.
It would be nice to have some of those.
Yeah.
I've not gotten any of those. I've not gotten any.
I knew that was going to be a mess.
I'd like a few of those simple ones. But, you know, I would say it starts with the collective planning process so that people can see interdependencies. As soon as you start to see changes, how will you adapt? I'll give a personal example to that. I went through some significant health issues 15 years ago. The things that were prescribed to me to do, I said, that sounds okay. But as soon as I began to do some of them, I had metrics that began to move in the opposite direction of where they should. Now, fortunately, I had established the right targets, and I could begin to make different choices around tackling those targets. And I was measuring them. So I think in any business ecosystem, as you begin to engage the plan, measuring the result against those targets is critical.
And so, Adam, how do you set those targets? How do you know, what you should be measuring against? And of course, Dan, feel free to kind of get into that. But I feel like that's a reason why change management often gets this kind of soft skill reputation, is because it's not attached to actual tangible ROI or outcomes.
Well, it certainly can be attached. You certainly don't want to find out that it's attached the wrong way. I think for me, it always comes back to, what are we trying to accomplish, right? What are we trying to do? Why are we doing this? We talk a lot about different types of enterprise systems deployments. Why are we doing that? What are our objectives? What do we expect this system to do? And there are a number of different ways that starts to develop, right? You have folks that have been on aging platforms that are now a security risk for the business. And so their answer is, I need to be able to move my business as similar as it is today to a new environment that solves my security risk. Okay. So in that, you're managing a change, just a lift and shift, right? We have a security problem, and I need to just replicate what I have here and put it over there. So it becomes can we do the things that we were able to do before as effectively as we were able to do them before? There are other folks that run projects that are designed to create positive change, a positive impact. We're going to increase our return on investment by cutting costs in this space so that our margins improve, and it's going to pay for itself. Okay, what does that look like? Where is that savings going to come from? You can say it out loud and mean it until you're blue in the face, but until you say this is where it's going to come from, you don't know that you're going to achieve it at all. And you need to put yourself into a position where, when you start your project, you know which decisions you're going to make and why. And this is where that becomes a bigger conversation as it pertains to the whole of the picture. I am doing this project to reduce cost, right? That's my target here. We're going to create efficiencies. We're going to reduce cost. I know where these cost reductions are going to come from. And then somebody says, okay, should we build it this way or should we build it that way? And somebody says, well, this way makes much more sense. It's much more rational. And then somebody goes, right, but that is going to cost more money. Okay, so let's do it the other way because it aligns with our goals. And that way we can say we are freeing up, let's take warehouse space, for example. Warehouse space costs money, right? Turnover, we're going to increase our turnover. We're going to have things flow out faster. So we're going to make some changes in our supply chain so that we are turning our inventory over more quickly. And so we're going to make some changes to our system, and we're going to make this adaptation. And somebody goes, right, but we have to be able to create these humongous orders so that we can fulfill our sales orders over a long period of time. And so it says, okay, great, we had to build for that scenario. Actually, you don't. You're intentionally not building for that scenario. Right? So when we're thinking about that change, that's a change in mindset for companies that we've worked with, which is I had to think less about massive amounts of inventory and now more about small amounts and turning it over more quickly. So we shouldn't build it that way. We should build it in a way that allows us to turn more quickly and solve the harder problems on how do we get smaller amounts more frequently and to adapt to that turnover. And that small change in mindset, to Dan's scenario as well, creates a change elsewhere, right? Okay, so now I know how I'm managing my inventory in smaller increments. That means I have to order in smaller increments. That means I need to adjust my min-max levels. I've got my purchasing and procurement team needs to know that this is how we're going to do it. My production team needs to know how we're going to do it. Now, this one change that I've adapted to is cascading, and other people are going to have to adapt to that. And so when they change and react to that, then I have a reaction to it, right? Now we're talking about that adaptive change model, right? I managed my change. That's change management. I managed my change. I'm done, right? No, you're not. If you're done at that point, all you've done is created a problem for everybody else. Change intelligence for me is about changing the way we or changing what we do after that first change, because now our circumstances are different, our feet are set differently, and so we have to react differently as an organization. If we can be adaptable organization wide to these types of changes, now we have some flexibility, we have some muscle memory to be able to say, this is improved here, I need to respond to that, as opposed to react badly to it having changed somewhere else and ruining my life. So for me, and if you trace that all the way back, those people who are now impacted by my change can look at the purpose and say, oh, well, I can understand now why he did that. He's decreasing costs. So my response to that change needs to sync up with that. Why would I let them decrease their cost here only to increase it somewhere else? That's counter to the point. So when you come back to the strategy and the objectives, why we're doing this, that's where it all starts. It has to be clearly defined.
Absolutely. And before we kind of get into what is change intelligence, right, and why was that important to create that methodology, I really want to drill down into, I love the idea of that intentional design, right? Really understanding what you're building your systems for, focusing on that. And so I really want to drill down into those targets though, Dan. So when you walk into a business, you're helping them identify, like, what should I be measuring in these types of things? Can you take us through kind of what you would advise to really look at when talking about change targets specifically?
Yeah. So, and I'll say, I think for most businesses, they underestimate how hard it is to identify the targets. That we have really smart business people, but most of the people are working in a function. They are pulled into the focus of a given function. And if you're doing that, it's hard to see the entire ecosystem, the interconnectivity, and the interdependencies of all of the functions. So the insiders of the business, and also I think just the habit patterns that you're pulled into and the rhythm of the business, it makes it hard for the people in the business to step back and do an objective evaluation of what the targets should be in the new environment that you're working towards. So when I walk into a business, I immediately begin to ask questions of leaders and others in the ecosystem, starting simply around strategy. Help me understand the value that this business creates for customers that is better or different than your competitors. Now, it's very normal. It's unusual for it to go well, but it's very normal that I hear different answers to that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So immediately there's a strategic alignment insight. Then if you go to the different functions and begin to ask that same question, you'll begin to identify trends and patterns of how they perceive it. Having an outsider with a significant amount of business acumen come in and do that can reflect back to the business where the misalignments are around the strategy. And as you do that, you can really understand then how that leads to a focus on the processes that are important to people. And if you're not thinking through the misalignments at the process and execution level, you're going to struggle in change management. I rarely see people begin to ask a chain of questions that seeks out alignment of strategy down to the execution layer. Those perceptions around what's important at the execution layer will ultimately drive the actions that people take as the change unfolds. You can so beautifully articulate vision and a mission. You can articulate the why. And if people have a perception about their role and why it's important, that will twist and pull their actions towards their perception well over any overarching message around a vision. So strategic alignment around value, process alignment of how that begins to add up to value, how each person perceives how they fit into there, builds really this overall picture of the business. I would encourage people as they're engaging folks to address the change to help them in their change journey. Look at the people who you're engaging. Have they run businesses? Have they been a part of running a business? You are asking someone to facilitate a process to identify targets that create focus in your business, not just to manage a training exercise or a communication plan. You have to actually understand the choice factors that the customers are using to buy your product. You have to understand the manufacturing systems that are able to deliver those, or the service models that deliver on those choice factors. You have to understand procurement systems, supply chains, distribution networks, demand planning systems. All of those things are portions of the ecosystem that if you don't have experience to ask questions in that execution layer, you will not land on the targets that will help the business actually get to where they want to go. I would just ask companies that are going through change processes, look at the targets that you have. Do they actually challenge the execution layer in a way that will drive up to the value of the business that you're trying to create? I rarely see people connecting those dots in a way that makes sense.
Well, there's so many questions in the audience and a couple of different conversations that I think are worth picking up on, because it's,
Adam loves to steal my thunder on this side.
I like to listen to what people are saying, because there's we have a number of them where we've over-optimized for specialization and underdeveloped for integration, which is, I think, a comment that is on the thread of what Dan's saying is, it doesn't matter, like, you could turn this dial over here, but you got to know all of these other things are going to change in response to that. It's not isolated. It's tied to things. There are strings that will turn. If you pull this one, 4 other things are going to change somewhere else. I think that's something that we've seen a lot of organizations come to us because they've struggled with consultants who don't get that. They operate in one lane and they don't see this picture of, if I change this thing, it is going to have an impact somewhere else. And even in the conversation we just had about, I'm going to change my inventory turns. You saw how that went from several different teams within the span of 15 seconds. You got 3 different teams involved now. And we haven't even talked about demand planning and the sales order and how we actually are going to fulfill that. And and all of these bits and pieces of one change, and somebody says, I'm going to reduce this cost. And then you wonder why this is hard, right? And that's something that I think is an important thing to connect on, is you have to look at it as if the pieces are connected. Another comment on here that I think is important to pull on too, because it's the answer isn't exactly how you'd think it'd come out, which is it necessarily a bad thing if you hear different things from different people? It's not a bad thing. Different people have different jobs, right? So many consultants come in and they say, we're going to get the executive team aligned so that they are saying the same thing. If your CEO, your CFO, your COO, and your CIO are all saying the same thing, then why do they have different jobs?
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
So go ahead.
No, I think that's a big piece of the common theme here. And I appreciate you kind of pulling at each one of those threads. It's something to talk about kind of before we move on to change intelligence, because both of you have showcased really the integration of the amount of people involved in this. So who leads it, right? Like who is responsible for making sure that we go from just we have a change management strategy, these are our targets, the end, to the execution phase of making sure that, one, we're held accountable to those targets, we're achieving those targets, and we're able to address those complexities, right, that come with our adaptive planning. So Dan, take us through that a little bit, and then let's go into change intelligence and address a few more of these. I'm going to bring up the one here that there's so many great comments, I can never find them. But the one that talks about, I often meet companies like 20 employees where there's a lack of a person who's in charge of a leader. And I think this is especially true in manufacturing.
Yes, and I think this is a good point. Having somebody inside of the organization that can do it can be challenging. One, can they step out and see the ecosystem? And two, if you are a part of the organization, I've yet to find the organization where there are not factions of people that pull against each other. Being a neutral leader in this process is of great value, and maintaining neutrality in the process is valuable. Hard to do as an insider. Everybody has relationships inside of an organization. There's perceptions that come with those relationships. So I think this is a very good point. Having an outsider assess that ecosystem so that you can really think through what needs to change in the ecosystem and the interdependencies is at the heart of change intelligence. I think we've hit this point several times. I'm unaware of other change management processes that have specific structures in place to deal with the ecosystem and the interdependencies. Because you are facilitating alignment of targets and you are actually tackling the execution layer of the company, pulling a person from the internal organization to do that probably is going to set off a fairly challenging political chain where neutrality is questioned. This person has a stake in this part of the business. This person has allies in this part of the business. And as soon as those things begin to show up in the process, you're going to run into some challenges. So I love the question, and whether it's 20 employees or 20,000 employees, neutrality is very valuable in this process.
Yeah, I think even more so with 20,000, right? Because of those interpersonal relationships that are equally as complex and complicated, as the problem. So in talking about change intelligence, I have one. Why did you feel like that was something that needed to be brought to the marketplace, Dan?
I would say from the pain that I experienced throughout my career, I saw early in my career so many change efforts that had the very best intentions behind them. I watched leaders articulate the need for the change with just eloquence and clarity. I watched well-intended leaders reach down into the organization, utilize the relationships to help people understand why. And there was very good business sense for making these changes. And I watched all this energy at the beginning of change efforts crash into conflict, where people who had worked together for years in a very effective way almost became mortal enemies, where they couldn't stand to show up in the same room together. And it was like, there's something wrong with this. And I watched consulting groups engage their process to address that. And, it would seem to fall apart at the same spot. It would fall apart at the point of execution where complexity intersected with the plan. So, as I watched that unfold, and interestingly, as I was navigating my health challenges, I was learning from the medical community that they suffered from the same thing. Doctors have a corridor that they operate in, and they don't always communicate with other doctors to connect the systems of your body. And I recognized I'm going to have to lead my health journey. I'm going to have to pull that together from different experts, just as a business has to do the same thing. They have to get somebody who can pull the pieces from across the business together in a coherent plan. And again, if I were to have asked one doctor to do that in my journey, it would have fallen apart. If you ask a single leader in an organization to do that, it's probably going to fall apart. So I really think it is. It came about as seeing the lack of capability and execution from multiple failed change efforts early in my career.
Absolutely. And that is the perfect why, right? To actually see a need for the marketplace, less more of a framework, right? We're good on OCM frameworks. We're all set. We've got enough of those. And at the end of the day, it really matters what's going to create that impact and change for your organization, as opposed to, what your neighbor's doing, your competitors doing, because now the modern business ecosystem is so different. That's a lot of times why we have a hard time recommending core products like ERP products, because a lot of times these businesses are just too specialized at this point to hit all of those functions. Same with kind of those quote unquote templatized change management approaches. It's not like it's not a great place to learn, but it's certainly something that we need to be able to look at. So,
well, Kyler, if I could just throw one more thing into this space
absolutely.
that I think is relevant to that question. I had I could see the need for it from what I had just shared. And then in 2019, I was asked to lead the IT function for a Fortune 100 company. And I don't have a technology background. That was a scary endeavor. There was wonderful technology people around me. And as we identified our priorities that would help take the business forward, we had to tackle the execution layer in a decentralized organization that needed to bring synergies together in our technology platform. So this was really at the largest scale that I'd ever done it, begin to practice change intelligence, where the collective brain had to identify the path that would hit those targets. And we would have to navigate the changes that we ran into in the process. Not knowing the technology as well as a typical CIO, I leaned on the change intelligence process. This process pulls the thinking from the group, and we're transparent in the interdependencies and build a rhythm on outcome adapted execution, we can probably make some progress. And we made a lot of progress, and it was probably the best learning that I could have, putting it in place in such a large organization out of necessity, because I couldn't manage it any other way.
Absolutely. Yeah, most definitely. I think that's the amazing part about the value you bring to these organizations, is a lot of times we have that kind of fear or that hesitancy around technology and what that actually means. who owns those decisions. You see Adam and I, go head to head about this all the time. I think they live in IT. Adam thinks they live in the business, right? So, and there has to be a combination between the two to have that collective brain approach. So I'm going to bring up this question from Jordy. Hi, Jordy. We're always very happy to see you. Thank you for joining. And I'm going to summarize it because it's a long one. So let me know if I don't get it, Jordy. But what he's saying is there's some hesitancy to make those initial targets, like those initial decision making. And because even if we make those decisions, they may change downstream, right? Those targets.
We lost you.
There you are.
Sorry, I was lost in the cloud for a minute. But it's because I've been doing all these videos about Oracle. They're shutting me down on the internet. So what are some efforts or strategies that can provide that comfort or confidence to organizations to make informed decisions while knowing they can still adapt downstream? And I think that's a huge part about change intelligence is it's using the data model, right, of the organization to adapt those changes as we go in measuring those targets. So I'll throw it up, jump ball. Who wants to take it?
I'll use, again, I'll go to a personal example here. Back to my health situation. Jordy, I think companies that wait to make decisions on the execution path, they're just deferring action. They're hoping something's going to come up that shines a light on it. That rarely happens. Use the best information you have, decide down the path, measure it against your targets. So in my health journey, I had to reduce the stress in my body for it to heal. I measured my cortisol levels every week. I made decisions about things that I would do to reduce the cortisol in my body. And I would tell you that probably the first 4 or 5 decisions that I made did not do it. In some cases, it actually raised it. Now, I would have had no idea if I was doing the right things if I wasn't measuring it on a weekly basis so that I could understand if I was moving towards some of my targets. Mm-hmm. I don't see, and this is a big part of change intelligence, if you have the right targets, there has to be a measurement system of how your choices add up to those targets. If you have that in place, if you have that change intelligence structure in place, you can have a lot of confidence to say, we're going to make this decision. We don't know if it's right, but we are going to find out. And I would make the argument that it is almost as valuable to find out what doesn't work as finding out what does work. You are never going to get it all right, especially in complex adaptive change. So it's having those layers of change intelligence embedded into the execution layer, drilling down into the execution layer to understand the interdependencies, having the right targets, measuring it so that you can actually adjust in real time. Everybody sees those adjustments at the same time. When everybody sees the adjustments, they can make smarter choices. I don't see that in change. I see that in change intelligence.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Well, I think there's a lot wrapped up in that too that kind of deserves to be pulled out of it. One is that it's most of the hesitancy in initial decision making is because people are afraid because it's hard, right? Mm-hmm. It's hard to make decisions, and so people stall on that. Well, guess what? It's not going to get easier. It's always going to be hard. You can put a decision off for a day, a week, a month. What actually tends to happen is it gets and this is a bit of an oxymoron in it, but decision making in some of those scenarios actually does get easier with time. You know why? Because things blow up. And now you have a problem. The answer is clear because it's on fire. Your decisions were harder before because you had the opportunity to avoid that fire. How can I do this or that to avoid this problem from happening? And in not doing anything about it, not making a hard decision, you create the problem. You let it happen. And that's part of the I like that. Let's make decisions and let's see how they go.
Yeah.
And I would rather make a decision and stub my toe than not make a decision and have a major problem on my hands. So I think that's one part of it. I think another part of it is this thought process that we need to make the right decision and it needs to be effective right away.
Mm-hmm.
This is where the measurements come in and the change intelligence side of it is, right? We can make a decision to influence a particular metric and to target that, and then decisions that support it. And then we stay focused on the metric that we're targeting. And then we use change intelligence to modify the path that we're on, right? How we get there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we thought that this was going to impact that. It did not have the desired effect, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
in scale or in the direction we thought it would change. So
Mm-hmm.
now we have something that we can adjust to, right? I'm not making one large decision anymore. I've already made the hard decision, and now I can make little decisions. Those are way easier, right?
Yeah.
And then when you make a big decision, it steers more aggressively. Making smaller decisions is a whole lot easier. It's like steering a boat, right? And instead of steering a small ski boat, you're steering a massive ship, right? You make one small turn and it's hard to get it back going the other way. If you make one big movement, you make small adjustments, and that's how you stay within the lines. I'm curious what the two of you guys think about something that I struggle with this in, though, because there is, as you start thinking about systems deployments, there is a need to get it right. Yeah, what we're talking about is don't be afraid to fail. But if you're going live on a software system, it better be right, because if you fail, we have a different type of problem, and those aren't things that are easy to fix. So how do folks reconcile the difference between let's make some decisions, let's allow them to be correct, let's allow them to be incorrect and adjust along the way but we got to go live on a system, and if we're wrong, we could end up in a space where we're unable to invoice, we're unable to ship, we're unable to produce materials. So I'm curious what you guys think about reconciling that difference and how it is change intelligence can help with that.
I think, to me, the distance between the outcome and the people that do the work within the change process matters. And you can tell me if this makes sense to you guys. What I've typically seen in big systems projects is you'll have a group of people come in and define the to-be state with a group of users. They run off for a long period of time. And then they come back and you're going to go through some testing and they say, ta-da, here you go. And people say things that I'm not going to repeat on this live stream. They're like, how is that at all representative of what we talked about? And it's because you took what we said and you shoved it into a pre-existing solution or software package. It's the best we could do. Mm-hmm. So, to me, it's about how tight are your feedback loops, how tight are your measurement systems in that change intelligence process, so that the people who are attached to the outcome get to see it, respond, adjust closer to real time. The larger these measurement gaps and feedback loops are in any process, that you are increasing the chance of failure exponentially, or you're going to land in a spot where you're like, now we got to spend 6 months trying to get the toothpaste back in the tube, which is never something that you can really do. So, a hallmark of change intelligence is tight loops, that in some cases, it may slow you down a little bit so that people can see the mechanics of what's being built, and you can hear it. I think that's part of the value that, we bring in the Confluencial, is that we can make sure the technology is actually hitting the process, the intended process that the business wants, instead of hoping that it magically fits into a solution that's going to get unveiled and people say, oh, this is good. And I've never seen that happen. I've never seen the big gap in the unveil and people celebrate and say, that's what we did. That's great. Yeah. You don't see it.
Absolutely. I think a lot of people visualize, Adam's lost in the cloud. Visualize a go live as like a rocket launch. Welcome back. Speaking of coming back. And it's like, that mission control visualization of everyone's like cheering and it's amazing. And that's not at all what typically a go live is. And I think the biggest piece I would respond to you, Adam, and building off of what Dan said, is just that mindset shift of, this is something that needs to be as disciplined as a workout routine, a health journey, and something like that. You don't just automatically declare, I'm going to run a marathon and then go out and run the best marathon in your entire life, right? You have to train for those types of different things. And I think there's a fine line, which is why it's important to have that outside lens to the business, whether that be someone that's not typically involved in those types of projects that you're using as more of a sounding board, or if that's an external leadership coach, to say, this is good enough, you guys. We gotta, go and make the decision. But that's way different than just saying we'll fix it once it's done, which we see a lot with when we have a forced migration for a system or version change, right?
Yeah.
A lot of times that's conversated as, is conversated a word? It is now.
Conversed.
Yeah, right.
You know what it means.
As an update or an upgrade. And that's not at all how that's going to operate. So having that ability to make those hard decisions up front while saying and communicating as a leadership team, this is going to be challenging, right? And that's okay. That doesn't mean that we hate our jobs. That doesn't mean that we have a really negative atmosphere. It means that it's going to be difficult. And that's where we see people get either taken for a ride by software SaaS vendors, or we see people not get the value, is because they didn't think that it was going to be a difficult project or a disciplined project. And that's why I love what you said in the beginning, Dan, about the project management piece and the attachment to that, because we see a lot of change teams, especially bigger organizations, that just don't have the technical practice of how that needs to be operated within exception.
Well, I'm sorry, go ahead, Adam.
Yeah, for me, I think another thing that, as you guys are going through this, I'm sorry, somebody's out there just pulling strings.
I'm telling you, we haven't even said a system name yet.
Right? They know.
Censored.
So for me, I think that what you guys are also reminding me of is the mistake that go live is the destination.
Yes.
Right. Now, yeah, we got to get there, and there's a whole journey. Go live is a milestone, right? We had to make decisions along the way to reach that milestone, and we can challenge those decisions along the way within test environments, right? We have testing cycles, and the next piece of it isn't to just simply say we went live, right? It's to say that we went live, and now we have a journey to continue on. Yeah. So when we get focused on making decisions about going live and avoiding failure in that space, what we're actually talking about is, yes, it's a significant decision to go live, and it could be a failure, but you do still need to make decisions after that, whether it's a success or not, right? You're not going live you're not implementing a software system simply to go live on it. You're implementing it for the purpose of supporting your business in the future. And what does that look like? What do we do next? And for some folks, what we do next is we start identifying continuous improvement opportunities. For some folks, what we do next is freak out. But at some point, that it has to be, this is an event, it's a milestone, and then after that we got work to do.
Absolutely.
If I can come back to your point, Kyler, about PMO, and I try to practically attach it to where this conversation started around change intelligence. I think a question that somebody who's going into a big change where there is project management involved, the first thing you would look at is if project management and change management are two separate offices or led by two separate people, I would have red flags going up right away. And then second of all, when you look at project management, if it's being done in a hub and spoke manner, which I typically see, you have a change manager working on these spokes with different functional areas, bringing things together, as opposed to creating a collective brain, I would have a huge red flag. I think this is a part where it just makes practical and common sense. If you have a project manager operating in a hub and spoke system, oftentimes where the targets have been identified in a hub and spoke system. And then you have a separate group that's going to help navigate change. How is it that you can possibly bring all of the brains together to navigate complexity in a way that makes sense to all the people involved? It's not set up for success, yet that is the standard way it gets done. So as you hear Adam talk about the integration, there's a different structure to setting up the project and the change system to address the integration that needs to occur. And probably, I think, just the simplest way, if somebody wants to just at the simplest level say, are we going about this the right way? Look at how your PMO is set up, look at how your change management is set up, and ask yourself, are we going to be able to respond to changes that happen in this structure? And if you can't describe how you're going to be able to do that, you're probably heading into a path that's going to be uncomfortable at some point.
Absolutely. And not only uncomfortable, like uncomfortable is okay, right? But the ability to address that in an effective way is going to be a huge piece. And I know, to have you on the team, Dan, that's really what we added to the Confluential's expertise in this. Obviously, Adam and I are both systems people. We certainly know about integrations and the need for that fresh DNA in an organization to understand that their system is really related to what they're trying to achieve. But Dan brings that next layer of us being able to effectively give our clients that change intelligence plan. We've always shied away from change management, not because we don't do it in our projects, in our PMO projects, but because a lot of times when we say the word change management, it's automatically a fluffy discipline that everyone's like, yeah, we'll get to that. We got it. Right. But now we see it evolve to things like adoption and having those actual behavior changes in the organization, which is why, change intelligence kind of was born from Dan's methodology. So we've got to wrap up here. Any final thoughts to these two or anything else you both want to add in closing?
The last thing I'll add is directly related to what you said. The reason why I joined the Confluential, while you frame both of yourselves as systems people, I have experience working with you guys, and you tackle business problems by addressing systems. You're not doing systems just to do systems. It's intended to get bottom line results, reduce risk, increase profits, increase employee engagement. I saw that unfold working with you guys, and change intelligence is a mechanism to help businesses get bottom line results. It is not a fluffy process. Yeah. So, the fact that we have different tools to go at the same thing to get bottom line results makes it very easy to work together.
Excellent.
Absolutely. We're super stoked to have you. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for adding your qualifications to what we do, because this makes us even more effective, even more client centered. So we're able to address quite a lot more. And I think that treating this as a journey, treating everything you do in business as a journey as opposed to having destinations is really the key behind change intelligence and all of these things that we try to do. Right. So where are we going on this journey? And I'm excited. So this is gonna be good. I'm stoked.
And we're having fun while we do it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Doing what we do best. Well, thank you to you guys. Thank you to the audience. I'll go back in and answer these questions. Appreciate everyone joining today.